All right, I already have this video up. I've had this open in a tab. Launch of the Nintendo 64. This is a 32-minute video, but I'm probably gonna react to this.
The Nintendo Entertainment System
That's
is
probably
widely
too loud.
credited with resurrecting
This
the
is
North
probably
American
good.
home video game market and was a defining feature of the standard
It is
American
good.
childhood in the 1980s. In 1991, the Super Nintendo was released and immediately locked horns with the Sega Genesis for control of the 16-bit generation.
I didn't grow up with the
SNES.
SNES.
Systems launched in 1993 foretold the transition of home
The
games into
Jaguar.
3D, but it was the 1995 release of both the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation that brought it into the mainstream.
Definitely have not owned
Even
that.
with AAA titles like Yoshi's Island and
Yoshi's
Donkey Kong
Island!
Country 2 yet to come, it was
Wait, hold on. Was that spaghetti?
AAA
Wait, what was that?
titles like Yoshi's Island.
What? What? Did they just like toss spaghetti at them?
Donkey Kong Country 2 yet to come, it was obvious that the Super Nintendo could no longer remain as Nintendo's flagship product.
What was that? What, dude? Commercials back in the day, man.
In 1996, Nintendo joined the 3D revolution by partnering with Silicon Graphics to develop the Nintendo 64. And while many of the older generation of gamers had moved on to the Saturn and PlayStation, in the mid to late 1990s, the N64 made Nintendo fanatics out of a whole new generation of gamers.
How's the volume, by the way? Yeah, that was a game I played, Mario 64. 1993, I wasn't even, like, born.
The history of 3D gaming stretches all the way back to the early 1980s with vector-based arcade games like Battlezone.
Wasn't there a Battlezone that was, like...
computer games, including 3D Monster
Maze. Was, like, re-released on N64. I might be thinking of something else.
By the late 80s, 3D graphics had matured to the point that racing games like Namco's Winning Run and Atari's Hard Drivin' were able to, through the use of polygons, give a rough approximation of the real world.
It looks so bad, but back in the day, this is like the best that you would have. Dude, this would make some people dizzy. Like, what the hell?
Polygon-based 3D graphics required powerful hardware, leaving home consoles of the time to fake it with techniques like raster effects.
I've never heard of this. This looks kind of cool. Did you just die from a mushroom?
In the 16-bit era, the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 scaling and rotation made pseudo-3D games like Pilot Wings possible. But Nintendo's first foray into proper 3D gaming came with the development of the Super FX chip, a graphical coprocessor that allowed for polygon-based 3D graphics. The chip was most notably used in 1993's Star Fox, a 3D rail shooter that was code-developed by UK-based Argonaut Games, who also developed the chip itself.
Sometimes I forget that Star Fox on the SNES was a thing. Like, the first one I played was N64. Oh my god.
The Super FX chip opened a Pandora's box, and
it's so, like, laggy.
Emphasize 3D graphics moving forward.
This just looks cursed.
Wait,
that was an item.
A chip called the GSU-2 was used to create Star Fox 2, which was completed in 1995 but never released.
Oh, 2 was the one that was never released.
By this time, both the Saturn and PlayStation had been released in Japan, and Nintendo wanted to avoid comparisons between Star Fox 2 and...
Okay, this game, Panzer Dragoon, I played this on the Xbox, and that was, like, really cool, like, back when I played it. Like, I don't... When I played it back in the day, I didn't know that it was, like, an old game.
Games on competitors' more advanced hardware.
But it was on the Xbox. See, this already looks a lot better.
They also wanted to create a
that actually, like, looked kind of good.
3D gaming and their next entry in the home console market.
The fuck was that? So many, like, cursed ass commercials, man.
Silicon Graphics created workstation computers that were capable of rapid 3D modeling, which in the early days primarily had applications in the fields of science and engineering.
An application for this might be an auto assembly plant where you're grabbing a metal part to be welded into another area.
The company was founded in Silicon Valley by a group of Stanford University graduate students in 1982, and by the early 1990s, as Hollywood shifted towards using computer-generated special effects, SGI workstations were used in blockbuster movies like Terminator 2 and were even featured on screen in 1993's Jurassic Park.
Maybe it'll swing south like the last one.
Sensing the potential of using Silicon Graphics technology to develop video games, brothers Tim and Chris Stamper, founders of Rare, leveraged their success on the NES to invest in an SGI workstation. At around the same time that Star Fox was hitting store shelves, the Stamper brothers were beginning development of one of the most important games to hit the Super Nintendo, and would use a new graphical technique creating 2D sprites from 3D renderings to develop Donkey Kong Country, which in the waning days of the 16-bit era helped put the final nails in the coffin of the aging Sega Genesis.
Alright, type 1 in chat if you've never played a Donkey Kong Country game, because that's me. Also, do you see that commercial like a minute ago with like the actual like fox in the suit or whatever? I need to see that.
Silicon Graphics specialized in producing highly advanced and highly expensive computer hardware with a limited target audience. But in the early 90s, they turned their eyes towards the mass market, and video gaming they thought was their golden ticket. In 1993, they developed a game hardware prototype called the Reality Engine, based on the MIPS R4300i CPU.
He said MIPS.
The lorry, the billboard turns. If your point of view was in the lorry, that would just look like a tree all the way around.
SGI founder Jim Clark went first to Tom Kalinske.
That's a big Sonic. What the hell?
But the two were unable to convince a skeptical Sega of Japan president Hayao Nakayama. Clark then went to Nintendo and got a much different reaction from Hiroshi Yamauchi, who agreed to license the technology on a non-exclusive basis. On August 23, 1993, Nintendo and SGI jointly unveiled their partnership, then called Project Reality, announcing that it would have a hardware presence in the arcades in 1994 and in the home the following year.
Players won't just watch their TV screens, they'll dive headfirst right through them.
In March of 1994, the Stamper brothers, of course already experienced in creating video games using SGI hardware, officially joined Project Reality, agreeing to develop games for an arcade-based iteration of Nintendo's next-generation hardware, beginning with 3D fighter Killer Instinct.
Okay, so back there it said like Ultra 64 or whatever, and I think I've seen like a prototype. There's like a prototype N64 console or something.
Ready.
This reminds me of Mortal Kombat. Like a lot.
Arcade powerhouse
That's
Williams
a dinosaur.
distributed the game in the arcades under the Midway label, as well as producing their own game for the platform, Cruisin' USA. Although these games were intended to show that a title developed for the arcades could be brought home with little to no compromise,
yes, Cruisin'.
in fact, the arcade hardware bore little resemblance to what would become the Nintendo 64.
I played that with my brother. It's like kind of fun.
Rare and Williams were the first two
fun.
members of what Nintendo called their Dream Team, a supposedly hand-picked group of mostly lesser-known third-party developers, as Nintendo's next big announcement pushed many of the big names out of Nintendo's camp.
There's like a rare like prototype of that, and it's like insanely valuable. I was right.
Although the company had hinted that their new console might use CD-ROM media, in May of 1994, Nintendo controversially announced that cartridges would remain as their medium of choice. Cartridge media was faster, but it was also more expensive and had at best about 1/10 the storage capacity. While publicly stating that this decision was based on what they felt was consumer demand at the time, it in fact may have had more to do with driving down the cost of hardware, with Nintendo's Peter Main admitting that it lowered the per-unit cost by at least $150.
I haven't played Turok.
This decision also allowed Nintendo to maintain tight control over software publishing, which had always been a defining characteristic of their business strategy. Bellwether third-party developers like Capcom, Konami, and Square, who had up to this point been major sources of quality third-party titles on Nintendo hardware, would come to have a vastly reduced presence on Nintendo's latest offering.
So basically, cartridges are good.
In 1994, Nintendo released the first image of the console.
I wonder they're
called
gonna show the
Ultra
fucked up
64,
controller.
likely a reference to pre-video gaming Gunpei Yokoi designed Nintendo products like the Ultra Hand and Ultra Machine.
Okay, I don't know if they're gonna show it, but like the Ultra 64, like the controller, it has like a giant stick. Like, I hope they show it because it looks really fucked up.
While this Ultra 64 was simply a prototype that was nearly 2 years away from release, it ended up being the final cosmetic form of both the console and cartridge.
I know that game.
On January 5th, 1995, the Ultra 64's finalized hardware configuration was announced, and is centered around a 64-bit NEC VR4300 CPU running at just under 94 MHz and interfaced with a 32-bit system bus. The 64 has a stock 4 MB of RAM bus unified system RAM, expandable to 8 with the purchase of 1998's expansion pack.
Okay, expansion packs are like expensive now on eBay. Like, I think they're like $50 or something. Mad Catz controller? I don't think so.
Multi-output audio-video jack as both its predecessor, the Super Nintendo, and its successor, the GameCube. But unlike the SNES, the 64's video output is limited to composite and S-video, with RGB output requiring hardware modification. The true heart of the 64's hardware is the Reality coprocessor, which is actually 2 chips in one. The Reality Signal Processor handles all 3D graphics
I don't know what I'm looking at.
as well as generating system audio, while the Reality Display Processor performs pixel-level functions like texture mapping, anti-aliasing, perspective-corrected texturing, and trilinear mip mapping, all of which combine to allow the hardware to display much smoother 3D objects than what's possible in either the Saturn or PlayStation without requiring high polygon counts.
Okay, so basically the parts of the console are good and allow good quality there. That I just summarized it. I played SSX Tricky, but I don't think I played that. I played Snowboard Kids
required
too.
the purchase of a multi-tap. The Nintendo 64 had 4 controller ports built in, a feature not seen on a mass-market video game console since 1982's Atari 5200.
Oh, damn.
Because of this, and thanks to the 64's powerful chipset, many of the most popular titles for the system prominently featured 4-player play, including Mario Kart 64, GoldenEye 007, Super Smash Bros., and the Mario Party series.
Okay, my theory is that a lot of consoles and stuff only had 2 controller ports because, like, they just assumed most gamers don't have enough friends to, like, you know, play with 3 other people.
The Japanese release of the Ultra 64 was scheduled for December 1st, 1995. And with the industry leader set to release a $250 64-bit system mere months after the launch of their own 32-bit systems, both traditional faux Sega and market newcomer Sony would try to grab as much market share as possible before the Ultra 64's arrival.
Oh, so they wanted to, like, release their shit or something before this.
The Ultra 64 made its worldwide debut in final form on November 24th, 1995 at the Shoshinkai trade show, also known as Nintendo Space World. The name of the system had changed, becoming simply the Nintendo 64. One rumor
so
was
different.
that the Ultra moniker was trademarked by Konami, ironically because they'd created a shell company during the NES days in order to circumvent
Skate or
Nintendo's
die.
own limits on third-party publishing.
Hey, let's play
According
some
to
Skate or
Nintendo
Die.
themselves, however, the name change was simply the result of a desire to create consistent
Hold
branding
on.
themselves, however. The name change...
See, you can kind of see it, like, the stick is, like, pretty big. Like, it's kind of hard to, like, see it, but
was
it's...
simply
That's like, yeah, that's like the original design. It's, like, really big.
the result of a desire to create consistent branding across all markets worldwide. It was also announced at this show that the Japanese launch date had been pushed back to April 21st of the following year. Although a number of games were shown at Shoshinkai, including conceptual animations for what would become Ocarina of Time, just 2 games were available to play. Kirby Bowl 64 was in development by Kirby creator HAL Laboratory and would eventually evolve into Kirby Air Ride, a game initially intended for release on the Nintendo 64 that finally appeared on the GameCube in 2003.
What?
The other game available for play was Shigeru Miyamoto's Super Mario 64.
That seems so
which
random.
Nintendo at the time claimed was just the game's working title. Although the demo was advertised as being only 50% complete, so polished was it that to show attendees it felt like they were playing the final product. But the
Dude, imagine being at this event and like playing this yourself. That would have been so cool back in the day.
experimental build of the game would undergo many changes before its release the following year. It was also at Shoshinkai that the public saw the Nintendo 64's unique inverse trident controller for the first time. The radical design features a unique three-handled configuration and includes both a standard D-pad and an innovative analog thumbstick.
Yeah, it was CCM.
The total number of action buttons on the face was increased to 6, and along with the 2 shoulder buttons, a trigger button was added to its underside. Lastly, the controller includes a peripheral slot, which can be used with a memory card unit for saving games, a rumble pack for force feedback, and a transfer pack for transferring data to and from Game Boy and Game Boy Color games.
Or you can put like an Ona hole in there, which I may or may have not done
was
before.
Designed by Nintendo's Research and Development 3, led by veteran Nintendo hardware engineer Genyo Takeda. As head of R&D 3, Takeda previously led the development of the battery-backed game save system that made its debut in 1987 with The Legend of Zelda, as well as producing numerous noteworthy games, including the first several entries in the Punch-Out franchise. Having been delayed yet again, the Nintendo 64 finally launched in Japan on June 23, 1996.
Oh my god, this game is so cool. What is that game? I've never played it.
Yen, and available on launch day were Saikyo Habu Shogi, a third-party title based on the Japanese board game Shogi, along with first-party titles Pilot Wings 64 and Super Mario 64, which predictably sold at a nearly 1-to-1 ratio with the system itself. Nintendo initially shipped 500,000 units to stores in its home country, and they sold out in just 1 week.
Damn.
Throughout 1995 and early 1996, excitement here for the Nintendo 64 was at fever pitch, and the latest scuttlebutt was front-page news on seemingly every gaming magazine.
Did you say scuttlebutt?
The Nintendo 64 made its official American press debut on the day before the Electronic Entertainment Expo on May 15, 1996. The launch date was announced September 30th.
As you know, we're going to launch the Nintendo 64 on September 30th.
As well as the price, $249.99. With the June launch of the N64 in Japan, consoles began making their way into the hands of industry insiders, increasing domestic press coverage, and as a consequence, the public's anticipation for the system, with many gamers resisting joining the next generation of video games until everyone's cards were on the table.
Dude, I can't stop looking at that. Like, it's so big.
In August, with the system yet to even be released, Nintendo announced a price drop to $199, bringing the system in line with both the Saturn and PlayStation. They also moved up the launch date 1 day to the 29th because parents were complaining that the 30th was a school night.
Hello.
Normie shit.
And sent this VHS tape out to registered Nintendo customers.
Welcome to N64.
Nintendo 64
this is gonna be
systems were in
cursed.
stores under lock and key on the 26th in preparation for the launch date. But when ubiquitous mall retailer KB Toys broke the street date and began selling systems immediately, other stores followed suit, and Nintendo had little choice but to greenlight the early launch nationwide.
Dude, oh my
Breaking
god.
with tradition,
The store just said, fuck Nintendo, and they just like sold their shit early. That's funny.
the system did not include a pack-in game, and came bundled with only a single gray controller and a set of composite audio-video cables. Additional controllers in a variety of colors, as well as an RF adapter for older TVs, were available as a separate purchase for about $30 each.
Dude, like, the amount of colors, like, I feel like new consoles don't do this anymore. Like, there's, like, so many different, like, variants for the controllers and consoles. Like, it's so cool.
The Nintendo 64 was released to both great fanfare in the press and high consumer demand. In its first month on the market, the Nintendo 64 sold over 500,000 units, and that November, Time magazine named the 64 as its Machine of the Year, perhaps hyperbolously stating that Nintendo had stuffed a $10,000 machine into a $200 package,
The hell
and
is
hailing
that?
it as the first game machine to offer fully immersive 3D environments. Although it would later turn into a two-horse race with the failure of the Sega Saturn in North America, in 1996 it looked like the console wars weren't just continuing, but were about to heat up. And the same gamers who were being told to stick with the Super Nintendo through the launch of the Saturn and PlayStation were now being encouraged to upgrade. With Nintendo stating that they wanted to emphasize quality over quantity,
the key isn't the number of games, the key is the quality of the games.
Only 2 games were available on launch day, each with a list price of $69.99. Pilot Wings 64 was the follow-up to 1991's Pilot Wings, itself a launch title on the Super Nintendo.
2 games at launch, still more than the PS5. Another game I've never played in my life.
The game was co-developed by Nintendo and Paradigm Simulations, who were part of Nintendo's Project Reality Dream Team, and who would go on to create the much-loved Beetle Adventure Racing.
I was looking at the bottom right back there. This game is pretty cool.
Pilot Wings 64 is a great game in its own right, and expands upon the original in every way, while showing off the power of Nintendo's then-new console.
What the fuck is that?
Unfortunately, Pilot Wings 64 was in the unfortunate position of coming out alongside one of the most hotly anticipated video games of all time.
Dude, so that guy was just like flapping. Like I thought Pilot Wings, like I thought, you know, every character has like a different plane, but no, that guy was just flapping. Like, what was that?
The first true 3D platform game was a little-known French title called Alpha Waves, initially released in 1990 on the Atari ST home computer, and brought to North America as Continuum by Data East for the IBM PC. The game uses simple, flat-shaded polygons, and has the player moving a simple polygonal geometric shape up and across a series of platforms.
This looks really hard to control.
While rudimentary to the extreme, it was head and shoulders above anything possible on a home gaming console at the time. 5 years later, shortly after the console's launch, Jumping Flash appeared on the Sony PlayStation, and although the game features a first-person perspective, vastly simplifying camera issues, it was an early indication of what was possible when bringing the platforming genre into 3D space on more powerful hardware.
Yeah, this had to be like mind-blowing at the time then.
Naughty Dog's Crash Bandicoot beat the Nintendo 64 to market in North America by mere weeks.
I didn't know Naughty Dog made Crash Bandicoot.
And while the game kicked off one of the PlayStation's signature franchises, its linear levels, by their nature, lacked the open-world exploration that would be characteristic of the genre moving forward. In 1991, during the development of Star Fox, Shigeru Miyamoto was already forming the idea of a Super Mario game set in a fully 3D world. But it was not until Project Reality was itself a reality that development of a 3D Super Mario game was begun. As was the case with all previous entries in the series, the development of Super Mario 64 was led by Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka, along with series newcomer Yoshiaki Koizumi as both animator and assistant director. Koizumi joined Nintendo directly out of college, designing manual layouts and writing storylines and dialogue for both The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and its sequel, Link's Awakening. Initially intending to become a film director, Koizumi sought to introduce deeper storylines into Nintendo's games, sometimes to the chagrin of Miyamoto, and would go on to co-design both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
When Miyamoto didn't want like good stories.
Hey, Mario! Hello!
The 3D model of Mario was created likely by Koizumi in a software suite by Nichimen Graphics called N-World, most likely on a Silicon Graphics Onyx workstation. Rather than trying to take advantage of the system's palette of over 16.7 million colors to give the graphics a more realistic look, Super Mario 64 stays true to the franchise's artistic style, with Mario donning a primary colored shirt and overalls, consistent with Miyamoto's vision to create the game as an interactive cartoon.
Nah, he didn't say it exiled, but it was
Mario
like close.
outside the castle of Princess Peach, who naturally has been kidnapped, and this open area provides both the tips and terrain for you to explore the game's new control scheme.
That was Hustlie movement right there. Sorry, that was rude.
Which gives the player a much expanded level of control. Once you're ready, you can enter the castle, which acts as a hub of sorts for you to access the game's levels. Only one level will be unlocked at the outset, with other levels unlocked in the order of your choosing after the collection of a requisite number of stars. The collection of these stars is the ultimate goal of every level, with a total of 7 stars available in each of the game's main stages. In the Super Nintendo launch episode, I said that Super Mario World was almost an adventure game in platformers' clothing, and this is the case even more so with Super Mario 64.
Using that cannon to go over there. It's just like so funny to see.
The game brought with it a major change to the core gameplay of a Super Mario title, and Nintendo is seemingly taking a risk by effecting such a fundamental reinvention of their marquee franchise. Aside from the obvious change to 3D, the game ditches linear levels and takes place in an open, almost sandbox-style world that encourages untimed exploration over level completion. While the completion of challenges leading to a star is your ultimate goal,
Here we go!
you can spend quite a bit of time wandering around and interacting with various elements in each stage.
I like how he was. I like how he was like basically just saying that the level design in Crash is like shitty and boring, and then this game came out and it was like actually interesting. It's like that's not what he wanted to say, but that's what I got out of it.
And Super Mario 64 offers a much deeper and more immersive gameplay experience than previous games in the series. Unlike the small handful of 3D platform games that preceded it, Super Mario 64 features a revolutionary camera system that allows you to move the camera in real time during gameplay.
Yeah, the camera that everyone who complains about is like absolute dog shit at the game because they don't know how to operate the camera, but it is a really good camera. You just need to know how to use it.
Arguably a hallmark of the franchise, each of Super Mario 64's levels has a distinct atmosphere and is uniquely themed.
Thank God he didn't go into like DDD because that's not like a good level to showcase.
The game's graphics, while colorful, are, as expected, much more detailed when compared to prior entries in the franchise, and I would argue that Super Mario 64 has visually held up much better than most 3D games of its generation.
True. I saw
veteran Nintendo composer Koji Kondo.
The look of SM64 has never bothered me, and I see other stuff like I don't know, like RuneScape, for example, that makes me want to like do something bad in my eyes.
Kondo also had a slew of new toys to play with on the Nintendo 64.
Like I think it's held up very well.
Great effect when writing the soundtrack for this game. While many of Super Mario 64's tracks are familiar rearrangements of franchise mainstay melodies, gone are the chiptunes of the 8 and 16-bit eras, replaced by an eclectic mix of jazz and orchestral styles.
My only problem with the music is that it's like too repetitive in this game. That's me taking like 10 shots and then swimming. This is me taking 15 shots and trying to kill Boots. Alright, just gonna show Hustlie gameplay.
The voice of Mario in Super Mario 64 is portrayed by veteran voice actor Charles Martinet, who got his start working for Nintendo at trade shows like the 1992 Summer CES, where both his voice and movements were coordinated with the Silicon Graphics generated 3D Mario.
Dude, that looks like the reverse bear trap from like the Saw movies.
In an interactive experience called Mario in Real Time.
Oh no. Cursed.
Hello, everybody. This is Mario. Give me a good view of the helmet here. Okay.
Martinet would go on to voice all of the characters in 1994's Super Punch-Out.
Gary J. Yay. Ooh. Huh?
He voiced every character. Damn.
His first
Based
in-game
alert.
performance as Mario took place in 1995's Mario Game Gallery for the PC.
Mario's a Game Gallery.
What the hell is this?
I'm a liker. Let's play, huh? Do you want to play as a Yoshi or as a Koopa?
Dude,
But it was
shut
his work
up.
in Super Mario 64 that cemented the voice of Mario in the minds of gamers.
Why would you want to play as Koopa instead of Yoshi? Showing off gameplay and then they just show that. Just falling off on the slide. 26.8, nice slide time.
In fact, it was Martinet's idea to have Mario fall asleep and dream of Italian food if you left him idling for too long.
I'm Italian.
That was his idea? That's like kind of cool.
Ravioli. Mamma mia.
Great as it may be, Super Mario 64 is, understandably as it was blazing a new trail, not a perfect game. While the new analog thumbstick gave players more precise control over Mario, even Miyamoto himself admitted that players accustomed to digital controls would face a steep learning curve. And as innovative as it was, the camera system does at times get in the way of playing the game. Super Mario
So the two things he just mentioned just has to do with people being normies and dog shit at games. Like, that's all it is.
also lacks a two-player mode, and as a consequence, Luigi is absent from the game. But in much the same way that the original Super Mario Bros. Influenced other two-dimensional platform games, the influence of Super Mario 64's gameplay and camera system can be clearly seen in other titles of both its own and subsequent generations. And the game can be at least partially credited with the move away from 2D gaming by the industry as a whole.
Where is he going? I thought he was just going to the cage.
It's simply impossible to overstate the influence that Super Mario 64 had, both on the game industry and on an entire generation of gamers. In much the same way that my childhood was defined in part by early video games and iconic 80s pop culture, Super Mario 64 looms large in the memories of those who grew up in the 90s and has gone on to become many people's all-time favorite video game.
I played this as a kid, I just
All of
don't
the
know
games
how
released
much.
For the Nintendo 64 over the course of its lifetime, Super Mario 64 is, for most people, the game most closely associated with the console. It was also the highest-selling game not only on the platform, but of its generation, moving just under 12 million units. It also arguably set the standard by which every other 3D platformer of the era was to be judged, and was, in Miyamoto's storied career, his favorite game to develop.
Yes, based alert.
Much like Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, in its own generation, Super Mario 64 never received a sequel. It would be 6 years before the next installment in the franchise, with 2002's Super Mario Sunshine appearing on the GameCube.
Boo!
And 11 years before the game's true sequel, Super Mario Galaxy, would be released on the Nintendo Wii. If you'd like to play Super Mario 64 but don't own a Nintendo 64, the game was remade and upgraded for the Nintendo DS in 2004, and both the original and DS versions of the game are available on the Wii U Virtual Console. That's going to do it for this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly, but before we go, I need to give a huge thanks to CGQ viewer Sammy.
The video
who
was
sent in
cool.
a much-needed first-party Nintendo 64 controller all the way from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. For his trouble, Sammy has a CGQ shirt coming his way, and if you'd like to support the show by purchasing a shirt, you can do so by clicking the Amazon link at the top of the video description. If this is your first time visiting the channel, also be sure to check out our other launch videos. We're going to switch things up a little bit this time, and taking us out is one of my favorite YouTubers, Banjo Guy Ollie, with his rendition of Dr. Wily's theme from Mega Man 2.
Banjo
As
Guy
always,
Ollie.
thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
I like how like SM64 was the main game focused on this video. Like it like the title is a launch of the N64, but it was like just so focused on Mario, as it should be. Yeah, that video was like pretty cool.